Welcome to the Inside the Box podcast, brought to you by Black Box Investigations and Appen Media Group. Dive into local issues important to the North Atlanta community, from politics and education to business and crime. Hear the story behind the story that you won't hear, read, or see anywhere else.
Welcome to the Inside the Box podcast. I'm your host, Hans Appen, and joining me on the show this week is the mayor of the city of Milton, Joe Lockwood. We had a really interesting conversation on sort of the history of Milton and how the city came to be as one of Georgia's newest cities, and some experiences that he's had along the way, any regrets, and then what he sees for the future. So I think you'll find it an interesting show, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Inside the Box podcast. In studio today, I have Milton's Mayor Joe Lockwood. Mayor Lockwood, thank you for joining us here in studio.
Thank you, Hans. Thanks for having me here.
You have the unique perspective of being a mayor that helped incorporate his city, and you are actually the city's only mayor since incorporation. And I do want to talk a little bit about that, but first off, just want to check in with you and see what's going on. Are there any big updates you'd like to share with the city? Any events coming up?
Well, events coming up. We've got Crabapple Fest coming up first part of October, so that's always been
It's a fun one.
A fun one,
Yep.
popular. And it's interesting. A lot of people will ask me, what are you most proud of with the city, the accomplishments? And I always say, well, our city's accomplished a lot of things I'm really proud of. And I could go through the list of a lot of bricks and mortar and public works and roads and improvements and parks and rec and public safety, on and on and on. And but I'm most proud of is when I see the sense of community when we have events like that. Mm-hmm. And I've seen over the years, every year it gets better and better. People are proud of where they live.
Bigger and bigger.
They're excited. The crowds are bigger.
Yeah.
It's just, you can sense it and feel it.
Yeah. So I'm right on the Alfred and Milton border, and so I've got two little kids, and they love a lot of those events that go down. The carving and Crabapple is one of their favorites, and was it Santa at the fire stations?
Yeah, that's a real popular one.
Yeah.
Pancakes with Santa.
So we are recording this on September 25th, and Crabapple Fest is Saturday the 6th. So I assume that there's more information on city website.
Absolutely.
They want to check that out?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I do want to ask you a little bit about sort of the history of incorporating Milton, how all that went about. Obviously, you have a very unique perspective on all of that, as you were the city's first and still the only mayor to preside over the city's government. Take us back in the day. What was really the kind of start of all of that, and how did that sort of go about?
Well, the city was incorporated in 2006, and I was not personally involved in the actual incorporation. The reason for incorporation was, let's just say we were the tip, North Fulton was the tip of the county, the Northwest Fulton area, with which is what now is Milton. It was moreover wanted to have some local control. Our citizens felt like, nobody really cares about what's going up here. Decisions are made in Atlanta by Fulton County, and they're probably not even come up here checking it out. So the basis was local control. As in most areas, it's, zoning and planning, that type of stuff is what really gets people fired up and interested. So, legislatively, Jan Jones brought the bill, and it overwhelmingly passed. There was a committee that was formed, the governor's committee, and basically set up the incorporation. And then there was an election held, and which I was elected. Sometimes I wonder, was that good or bad?
Too late now.
And it's interesting. People ask me my political aspirations, and I said, honestly, I didn't have any political aspirations. My friends used to jokingly call me the unofficial mayor of Milton. I mean, not Milton, but Alpharetta. Prior, because my office was right downtown. I knew a lot of people. I was involved in a lot of stuff. So when the opportunity for elections for the mayor of Milton and city council, I had a few people come up to me and say, "Hey, you should run for mayor. You do a good job." And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. A little bit later, a few more people would say that. And so anyways, I think between really thinking about it and several people's encouragement and, maybe one last couple too many hits on the shoulder. Come on, I dare you, I dare you. I decided to throw my hat in the ring. And quite honestly, didn't have any political experience. Wasn't real sure what I was getting into as far as a campaign. And what really hit me was, though, I spent several months prior to the election going around talking to people. And the more people I talked to, the more I got into it. And I saw what their desires and needs and wants were. And basically, as far as politically, I kind of got turned off in talking to some people that had run for office. And they, it's like, hey, you got to pick something and just drive that home. This is what I'm going to do and blah, 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 even if you're not going to do it. And I'm like, no, that's not it. And so I think I resonated with citizens as I talked to them, because I said, look, I'm not going to promise you that I can fix everything or do everything, because I think, let's use traffic, for example. If there was an easy button, somebody else would have already fixed it. So, but what I will promise you is that I am a citizen here. Everything that's important to me, my family, my church, my kids' schools, our friends, everything that's important for my family's life is here. So what will drive me is to try to make the decisions that affect you in a positive way, because guess what? By default, they make a better place for my family too. So, if I make a bad decision, I realize it's going to hurt me just as bad as it does anybody else.
Sure. So in your early entry into politics and as mayor of Milton, can you remember anything, any stories that were kind of a wake-up moment for you that was like, oh, wow, this is real. I'm the mayor of Milton. I got to fix this.
Well, I think probably the first wake-up moment was when the AJC started knocking on my door for an interview. I'm like, gosh, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, there's not just a handbook on how to become a mayor and run a brand new city. A lot of cities you're elected, and the city's 100, 150 years old. There's a protocol and a process and whatnot. So that was kind of interesting. My day job is I'm a commercial contractor, and by doing that, I am used to hiring experts in all different fields. I'm not an expert in everything, but I know to hire the right people in different fields. And what was interesting, a wake-up call was probably 2 days after the election. I got called in with our skeleton staff that was already set up and going over the budget. And they're saying, Mayor, we're in the red here. Our budget is not balanced. And they were concerned. And I said, well, let's pull everybody into a room and let's sit down. And just like in my previous professional experience, if we have a project that's over budget, you sit down and go through every item, talk to the electrical engineer, the plumbing engineer, the architect. Okay, what can we change? What can we tweak or whatever? And so we went around the rooms with each department and each thing and said, okay, what do we have to do now? What can we do? And within a few hours, we had a balanced budget. So that was worked out good.
I could see that. Yeah.
It was kind of a wake-up call first day.
So outside of city government and your staff, I guess Arthur Letchis was mayor of Alpharetta at the time.
Yes.
Was he a sounding board for you? Were there other people in politics nearby who were good for you to bounce ideas off or things of that nature?
Yeah, Arthur was great. I enjoyed working with him. Mayor Bodker in Johns Creek was good because they were a new city also, as well as Eva Galambos in Sandy Springs.
Outside of sort of your experience and your growth as an elected official and as mayor of Milton, any memorable stories about the city's growth early on?
Yeah, it was an exciting time. One example is we had to start from scratch with a public safety. Mm-hmm. So between hiring police officers and firemen and buying equipment, buying new fire trucks, buying police cars and all that, it's a daunting but an exciting task. And I'll never forget when we got delivery of our new fire trucks, and several of us get to ride around and drive through the high school and show them off. So that was pretty exciting.
Cool.
Not too many people get to start up from scratch. Do
you remember any early pushback from citizens of Milton on any particular subject?
We did have, obviously, and I've learned, unfortunately, there's always going to be pushback. Even if you make the absolute right decision, there's always going to be some folks that it doesn't resonate with. If 80% of the people are happy, you've done really well.
Yeah.
So, there was always always people with pushback. I look at sometimes, though, as that an opportunity or a challenge. Had an older couple that lived in Milton that had been there forever, and had a sign out in their yard with a big circle and an X across the city of Milton, and were against it. And somebody had talked to them, and they said, "Yeah, we don't want to have anything part of the city," and whatnot. And they relayed that to me. So I spent some time drinking a Coca-Cola and sitting on the front rocking chairs with this couple, and they ended up being a huge proponent of the city.
Changed your mind?
So, yeah. So sometimes you look at challenges. One other fun story was early on I got a letter from an elderly senior citizen, and basically saying that it was a handwritten letter that they got their tax bill and their taxes went up. Granted, it wasn't because of the city. Their assessment had gone up, but and she had said, look, I'm on a fixed income. My husband's disabled. My taxes are going up, and we're not getting anything out of being in the city of Milton. And at the bottom it said, you probably don't even care. And I think it was addressed to whom it may concern, but it ended up on my desk. So I found out where the name, I had the name, but found out where this lady lived. And so I went and knocked on her door. And she could barely see, was in a house coat. And I said, introduced myself, and I said, I'm from the city of Milton. And she looked at me funny, and then she said, first off, she said, just the fact that you came by showed me you cared. And I said, well, I do care, and I got your letter, so I want to, see if there's anything I can do to help. So I started talking to her and got a little bit of information. So I went back to City Hall, and again, got to realize this was all new to me. And I went to our finance director, and I said, hey, got this lady, she's this many years old, have burden with her taxes. And so our finance director sat down with me and said, well, there's these exemptions here and there, and, got to have this and that. So I went back with that information and sat down with this lady. Her name was Carol. And anyway, she filled it out. I witnessed a lot of stuff, and I took it back. And it really made me feel good about 2 weeks later when I was able to go knock on her door, and she was excited to see me and gave me a big hug. And I said, Carol, I've got your tax bill here. It's zero. So you're exempt.
Wow.
And so, there's some fun things.
That's cool. There's a lot to be said for showing up. And I think that's true of all sorts of scenarios in life. But we do see that a lot in both our local and our national politics. I think if we had more elected officials who would show up and they would listen more and talk less, I think we wouldn't be as politically divided as we seem to be. But we'll save that podcast for another day.
But I would agree, not only showing up, but just, and again, I think part of that is the desire for local control, just to have access. The people, myself, the council that are your leaders of your city, live here, and you have access. And I have found, both with showing up or communication, sometimes you can't give someone the answer that they want, but just the fact that you'll sit down with them or you're accessible and you listen does help. And I found a lot of times, and I tell people, I said, look, you may disagree with a decision that we make, but I would like to think if you were sitting on the other side of the table and you had the same information I did, you would hopefully make the same decision, or at least most of the time.
Sure.
And usually,
or at least understand your decision.
And that's usually the case. And I found if you get folks involved, if somebody comes to you with an issue or whatever, if you can get them involved and you try to at least meet them halfway or address the situation, they usually feel a lot better. It's funny, I call it the big circle. Sometimes and I'll use an example, you'll have people, had a group of folks where there was a cell tower that was being proposed, and it was near their neighborhood. Obviously, nobody wants to have a cell tower near your neighborhood. Sure. You just want to be able to use your cell phone. So they were not happy, so I said, come in and meet with us. So they brought about 10 or 15 people. We all met. I had our city staff and city attorney, and I explained, I said, here's from what I understand and what I've got legally, we can't stop the cell tower. What we can do, from what I've, researched and got my legal here, is we could maybe ask them to give us a little bit of buffer, plant some landscape, maybe hide the tower, make it look like a fake pine tree, right. This and that. And of course, nobody didn't, they didn't want to hear that. And I said, but that's what I've found out. But if you guys will all get involved and do some research, and you've got, a reach, go out to other people and come back and let's get together and we'll all see if we can find some other solutions. So about a month later, we all meet again. And I said, okay, what's everybody thinking? What have you found out? And the first thing they said, well, maybe we can ask them if they can buffer it a little bit, maybe move it back a little, plant some landscape and make it look like a country.
But interesting ideas.
But my point is, sometimes you got to, get involved with people and let them,
Sure.
Work with you to find the solution,
Sure.
rather than them just thinking that you're just making that decision on your own.
Yeah. Because I think there's an assumption, when it's coming from a political figure, that it's not always above board.
Right.
So I agree. I think as much as elected officials can be collaborative is probably a great thing.
And I think that's a good point you bring up. And I would say probably the perception people have is, people in politics maybe are not above board, or maybe there's this and that going in. I can tell you from my experience, and 99% of the people I've dealt with, it's not. We're in this to make like I said earlier on, just to make your community better. Mm-hmm. And there's really no gain other than the fact if you do a good job for your community. So I feel good about the city of Milton and everybody that's been involved in the city, that their heart was in it, and all of our elected officials from day one to really just do the best thing they could. So sure. It's not like a lot of people think. In fact, one of my favorite things is when you have somebody that has a negative attitude towards their elected officials in our city, and I enjoy inviting them, come, let's go to lunch, come over to City Hall, let me show you what's going on, let me explain everything. And when they walk away, they're feeling really proud about their city, and they're like, hey, can I get involved and help?
And you actually open your home. Don't you have a big Christmas party?
I have.
Every year?
I've done it a couple of times. Okay. And it was interesting. My wife and I decided we're talking about having a Christmas party, and she said, who do you want to invite? And I jokingly said, well, how about if we invite the whole city? And she looked at me like I was crazy. And then I mentioned it to our city staff, and it was kind of funny because I didn't realize it, but they were kind of going around me and going back and talking to my wife. Is he serious? But I will say this: so what we did, and we've done it twice, is basically had an informal Christmas party or holiday party, or some people want to call it that, but and invited the whole city, and we spread it out over several hours, and had the city council, city staff there. And what was interesting is, and it was the outcome that I had hoped. Again, we invited the entire city. I would say 500 to 600 people would show up, and it was spread out a little bit. But the whole reason for it was most people that are involved in their city or have an issue with the city, it's a negative issue. They're coming to City Hall or whatever, and so it starts out on a negative tone. And the reason we did this was and 90% of the people came were just like, hey, we just wanted to come introduce ourselves. We like living in the city. We just wanted to stop by. And the nice thing was, it was just a low-key, event. Everybody got to talk to city council people, talk to me, talk to some of our city staff. And it was all just kind of informal and casual. But when they left, they felt like, you know what? I'm glad I got to meet them. If I do ever have an issue and I need to go to the city, I'll feel comfortable calling. I know so-and-so to call, or I talked to, this council person or this staff member or the mayor, and they were open, said, yeah, stop by or whatever. So I think it really was a lot of goodwill there.
You going to do it this year?
I have a wedding at my house December 8th.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think
that could be a lot back to back. Okay. So what's next for the city? You all have had, you just built a new city hall very recently. You've had some turnover on staff and on council. It seems to me a little bit that we're sort of in kind of phase 2 of the life of the city of Milton. Would you agree with that? And then what do you see sort of going forward?
I could agree it's phase 2. I think the last 12 years we've at least 10 of the 12 years we've been building our infrastructure and building our city. City Hall is done. Our city center in Crabapple is really come along nicely and is going to continue to grow, and people seem to really enjoy that. Our Parks and Rec department, our Parks and Recs facilities are growing. We did a green space bond for $25 million, and so we're actively purchasing green space, parkland and passive space, to basically for the benefit of our cities, our citizens, and to keep things rural and all. So what I'm seeing now is for so many years we were building our assets. The next phase I see is going to be just taking care of those and maintaining them and trying to maintain everything we have, because what I've noticed is over the last 12 years, originally, most of the citizens in Northwest Fulton County just, hey, leave us alone. Well, now that we've gotten a lot of amenities and a great quality of life and whatnot, also their expectations are a lot higher. So as you add parkland or as you have passive land, whatnot, then you also got maintenance and long-term care and just managing everything. So,
do you see a little bit of your constituents seeing what's going on around them, say in Alpharetta, with some of the things that the city's done with its city center and whatnot, and almost, I want to say, like a little bit of competition? Like, do you have citizens saying, well, Alpharetta's doing this or Johns Creek's doing this, what are we doing?
I don't.
Okay.
I honestly see it from the other side sometimes.
Sure.
I get people from other cities saying, gosh, I wish our city was doing this and not what they're doing. Milton is, I believe, kind of a diamond and a jewel, and we're very fortunate. We have, if you drive through Milton, we still have 13 miles of gravel roads. It's kind of a refreshing, more of a rural feel. I think the majority of our citizens appreciate that and want that. But they also appreciate the fact that, hey, I'm just a couple of miles from downtown Alpharetta.
Sure.
And we've got, our city center, which is a little smaller and quainter, but, we've got amenities, we've got services, but we've also got, it just feels a little bit different, a little more relaxed in Milton.
So you see it a little more that they can enjoy the best of both worlds by keeping their community sort of the charm that Milton has, but then they're not too far away. They can just drive down the road and go visit some of those things in Alpharetta.
Absolutely.
Okay. So last question for you. We talked a lot about the history and the transition that Milton's gone through, some of the turnover at a staff level and at a city council level. There's been one constant throughout that entire thing, and that's been you. So how have you been able to do that, and what, if you had it to do over again, what would you change?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I was, as far as me being the constant, I'll have to give the citizens credit for that as far as reelecting me. I try to be a team player. I am never one. In fact, I got a compliment one time. I had a lady come in and meet with me, and she, an elderly lady, senior citizen, and she said, I knew I was going to like you. And I said, why is that? She said, because every time I see your picture in the paper or anything, you're always standing in the back. And again, I'm not one that, was looking for credit for myself or whatever. I appreciate everybody else's abilities and knowledge and whatnot, and realize that that's an asset. And I'm not smarter than anybody else, and we work together as a team. So I would say that's probably has a lot to do with it. It's a team effort, and everybody involved, we try to take their positive knowledges and attributes to make the city better.
Okay. And then anything you would do over in the last 12 years?
That's a tough question. I'm sure there are small things that, after the fact you look at and go, well, gosh, I could have done this or that. But overall, I think when you look around at our city and the history, I'm pretty proud of where we're at. Okay.
Well, Mayor Lockwood, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the show, and hope to do it again soon.
All right. Thanks, Hon.
Thank you.
This has been the Inside the Box podcast, North Atlanta's #1 local podcast. For bonus exclusive content, visit blackboxdocs.com. That's blackboxdocs.com. We welcome your feedback. Email us at pod@blackboxdocs.com.